As you can probably see, this is going to be a fairly meaty video. We're going to be talking a lot about carbon spokes in this video, so stick around. But ultimately, this is a review of the Fast Forward RAW, the top of the range wheel set from one of our favourite brands here at Mapdeck Cycle Works. And it comes with the new rim profile, carbon spokes, ceramic speed bearings, and it's lighter but more expensive. But can a wheel set like this, made in Holland, give us the reassurance of dependability and repairability that we're really after when we look at a wheel set like this? Please, please, please get these parts on your website. Okay, as you know, we're fairly big fans of Fast Forward wheels here at Mapdeck Cycle Works, mostly to do with their Riot wheels, which are an absolute favourite of ours. Just to remind you, the reason that we like these, it's just because one of those wheels that if you came into any bike shop and specified a wheel with riding in British conditions, you're probably going to end up with being built something like this. So DT Swiss hubs, Sapin CX-Ray spokes, brass nipples, and a really good quality rim with good handling characteristics and stability, and all put together for a price very similar to what we can achieve here in a bike shop, but with the addition of a better warranty that any bike shop can hope to give. So it's kind of one of those things that just ticks boxes, if you like. Now, here in the UK, Fast Forward has lost its current distributor, so we're importing these directly from Holland. Yep, these are all made in Holland, which is also a little plus point in my mind. This isn't a universal love for Fast Forward because they also make a wheel called the Tyro, and this is, to be honest, nothing particularly that special. The build quality is okay, the price is a little bit high for what you get, but it's not something that we really push or endorse. There's quite a lot of stuff in this area. The Raw is they're absolutely top of the line, all singing, all dancing, the lightest weight possible. So it's also got the carbon spokes, comes with ceramic speed bearings, and the starting price is around 2,100. So it's about another £300 to £400 more than the Riot. And it comes with a few benefits, but it also comes with a few downsides as well. So for instance, the Riot is one of those wheels that we can benchmark against. I've often talked about it on the channel as being a benchmark wheel. From this point on, you decide, if I'm spending more, what am I going to get? If I'm spending less, what am I giving up? So as we spend more on the Raw, what do we actually get? Well, you're getting a lower weight and potentially a stiffer wheel, but you're sacrificing durability because everything on here now is aluminium nipples. I'm going to show you some examples of galvanic corrosion that happens in this situation and why you've got to be very careful when you're choosing a high performance wheel about keeping things very clean and very dry. Well, that's not such a concern with the Riots due to those brass nipples and the Sapin spokes being so readily available. Okay, with all that said, let's get into the Raw. So first of all, they have their own proprietary hub, which means that if you need spare parts like end caps, axles, extra seals, you're gonna have to go onto the Fast Forward website. Now, right now, they haven't got every single spare part for the Raw on their website. So this is an appeal. Guys, I know you're watching at Fast Forward. Please, please, please get these parts on your website. I wanna see spokes, I wanna see end caps, I wanna see axles, spacers, free hubs, everything. I wanna see that on your website that anyone the world over can click, buy, order, get dispatched to wherever they live. As soon as you do that, this is a ringing endorsement from me. The spokes as well, they're not branded. Fast Forward don't make them, but again, they're not putting it on their website as to who makes them. Quick correction, when you take these out, there is a tiny little stamp in here called Vonoa. More on that in a second. And this is important. Do you remember the conversation that we had with Calvin at Ice Bike and about how hard it is to calibrate your spoke tension meters for carbon spokes? In fact, you can see this little fancy machine here we're going to talk about in a second as to how we're working around that in our bike shops. And then obviously we have the aluminium nipples. Now you have to have this because you need to bond on the end. So let me show you a spoke. So this is what most carbon spokes look like. You have the carbon elements here. This is a bladed spoke. Like Calvin was saying, every single carbon spoke on the market has got a different modulus characteristics of how much it bends. So even though you can take your verniers and measure the width and the depth, and you can use it onto the Park Tool conversion chart, every spoke is going to be a little bit different. Now, Fast Forward have told me that the spoke that they use measures the same as a steel spoke. And so in theory, if I was to measure this and then put it onto the gauge from Park Tool, so this is actually a 1.4 by 3 millimeters, and to build it up to about 120 kilograms of force, we're looking for a reading on the TM1 of about 20. So we can test that. So what I've got here is we have our spoke and our nipple. In fact, how these work is slightly different. Another quick interruption, please don't try and adjust your spokes the traditional way by having a bladed spoke holder and a spoke key here, because this is not going to achieve anything. This is just going to break the spoke. What you need to do is have the nipple held in place, and then you're going to need a 5.5mm nut driver with a very, very thin wall. And you need to remove the rim tape and go in from this side and do your spoke up like this. Let's just get this into our gauge. And I zeroed all this up earlier. Cool, there we go. It's 120 kilograms of force on there. So we can take our TM1 gauge and now we can measure what this has given us. So this is currently reading 21. So actually what Fast Forward are saying is pretty true. You can assume that the spokes that they use can be treated the same as a steel spoke according to their graph. So that's a plus point, but I really wish they'd add that to their website so that if you are a bike shop or you're trying to true these or repair a broken spoke yourself, at least you know that information. So the way of reverse engineering this is, if you have a wheel that you're trying to repair yourself, is you're going to need to find the wheel and then measure what the current range is. Now for this I can go through and I can either calibrate off the rest of the wheel what the TM1 range is saying, and then I might have to go and find a spoke that's going to give me the same characteristics. So you could, if you're lucky and you've got enough of the wheel that's intact, work out what the spoke tension can be, or you can make sure that you can use a device like this to then draw your own chart based on a few parameters here, so you know when the wheel is coming in to tension. A bit more info on this carbon spoke situation. You see, a machine like this is really helpful. It means that I can now create my own tension table. So what I've been doing here is essentially measuring with my TM1 tool, and I've gone right the way back to 20 on here and measured this at about 100 kilograms of force. So if I just back this off to 100, and I know that that is going to be a reading of 20 on the TM1. So I put this into an Excel spreadsheet. I then add some tension, add a little bit of time until I hit 21 on my TM1, so the next digit up, and then we have, make sure you take it off to make the reading, 116, and you go through that until you're at what you think is the maximum spoke tension. In this case I've got up to a reading of 24, which on this was 164 kilograms of force, which is crazy high. And as we just measured from the wheels, the highest reading that we got was 23, which according to this would equate to around 146. It is not super accurate, but I think this is the best way of doing it. The most important thing is that we have a consistency, and so long as your TM1 is reading the same number, i.e. 23-ish, give or take fractions of millimeters either side of that, your tensions are going to be perfectly adequate for a bicycle wheel. Now it begs the question, why the hell do we have to do this? Well, the reason is that the manufacturers of carbon spokes really aren't very opaque with their information. So this one is actually branded Vonoa Spoke. Now if you go and Google Vonoa Spoke, and I encourage you to do so, only thing that I can find is a very old YouTube channel with 15 subscribers and a guy at a trade show talking this through. The website that is linked to that doesn't even exist anymore. It just goes off to a completely dead website. But there is absolutely no information on what the recommended spoke tensions are on this. There is one reference to it being strong up to 3,000 Newton meters, which is pretty standard, but there's absolutely no guidance on what the recommended spoke tension should be. Or even, I can't even find anywhere where I can buy replacements of this. Put it into Google, please. If you can find somewhere, link me down below, because I cannot find anything. All I can find is a reference to Newman wheels, which is part of Cube Bicycles, are using this type of spoke. But again, you can't even use that from the Cube Bicycle website. There is another reference, if you start really looking around, that is part of Stren spokes. Now Stren is a brand that we come across quite a lot in carbon spokes, but again, almost impossible to just buy. You can't just go to Stren Cycling. Again, the best reference you can find is on their LinkedIn page, and all the websites associated with that LinkedIn page just go to complete dead ends. So at the moment, the whole carbon spoke market is a complete wild west. There's no information out there as to what the spoke tension should be, where you can go and buy replacements or anything. Right, back to the video. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the tension characteristics of a wheel. Now I'm gonna have the rear wheel out here. By the way, Fast Forward always provide you with these amazing wheel bags as well. Love that. Let's have a look at the rear wheel because that's always the most difficult one to get right. What we have here, we have a radial lacing system on the non-drive side, and we have a 1, 2, 3 cross design on the drive side. Using this, which we know is going to be pretty accurate now, we can have a look at what our tensions are looking like. So we are looking high on this side. So this is currently reading 23. This is looking fantastic. So what you expect, because a lot of these now are built with machines, probably to a better standard than most wheel builders can do, to be fair. Let's have a quick look at non-drive side. So the non-drive side, we're at 20. Other little features we can see here, the hub is one of those open designs. So they're not completely open like some designs, but they could definitely be a bit more closed off. I would like to have seen some sort of way of encapsulating, especially this non-drive side, just in case if you did have a real catastrophic failure, let's say 2 or 3 spokes broke at once, what you don't want is then a significant detensioning around the whole wheel that everything will just pop out. Now, this can actually happen with metal spokes. It's not completely exclusive to carbon spokes. We've seen it on the old Mavic stuff as well. And they actually went around and put in a little snap ring to try and hold things in a bit. Also, what happened in a metal spoke situation is rather than the spokes will ping out, is that once a few are detensioned, the rest of the metal spokes will all bend and you still end up with a catastrophic wheel collapse, but maybe not completely detached. I don't know, that argument for me, there's pros and cons to both. I don't think it's as clear cut as this is completely dangerous, but I think it's definitely something that would be easily covered off by the addition of a little snap ring to hold everything in. On the drive side here, we can see where these cross. They cross right the way down here to make a 1 cross, a 2 cross, a 3 cross design. And they are interlaced, but they're not interlaced with loads of strain. Sometimes when you see interlacing, you can see the spokes bending around each other. There's a very light touch between the 2 spokes there that are interlaced. So interesting design choice. Most of the time when you see this, you see these without any sort of interlation at those cross points. Okay, now here's the thing. Going back to our concept of a benchmark wheel and those Fast Forward Riots being a benchmark, solid, reliable, stable, etc. What are we actually gaining by going to the raws? Well, we are losing a lot of weight, but where's that weight actually coming from? Well, the easiest place to look is actually the spokes. And so I've got some digital scales here. Here I have a Sapin C X-ray spoke on a brass nipple, classic choice, and this is 5.45 grams per spoke, and you'll normally find 24 of them per wheel, so 48 in total over your wheel set gives 260 grams of spokes. This then is the Vonoa carbon spoke with the aluminium nipple on there, and this weighs 3.33. Going to the video that we saw from Vonoa, they claim that what you can do with carbon spokes is reduce your spoke count, which Fast Forward have done here. There's only 21 spokes in that radial spoke pattern. So 3.3 times 42 for your total wheel sets is 139 grams of spokes. That's 121 grams saving across your wheel set for all the compromises you're making if you break a spoke. How does that work out across the wheel set? Well, a set of Fast Forward Raws are 1,460 grams. Pretty impressive weight for a 55mm deep wheel around the £2,000 price point. Yes, I know you can probably save about £500 by going to a factory direct, elite wheels, net pressed, whatever it is. Compare that to the Fast Forward Riots, the ones with the steel spokes and the brass nipples, 1,620 grams, which often get criticised as being too heavy. It's a 160 gram difference. 121 grams of that is in the spokes, means that there's still 39 grams unaccounted for in this wheel set. So that is somewhere in the rim construction, the hub, whatever, there's another 39 grams of savings. So there's your choice. You are paying about another 400-ish pounds for saving 160 grams of weight and a massive headache when it comes to adjusting your spokes, breaking your spokes, or your spokes corroding. Is that worth it? Other part of this argument is if you can now spend another £1,000 and get into the next realm of carbon wheels. So we're looking at things like the Syncross Capital wheels, the Scope AirTechs. If you're really serious about saving weight, that's where you get the big differences. Those wheels are down to 1,290 grams for the Syncross, 1,244 grams for the AirTech. Then when you're saving that significant amount of weight, it might be worth all the compromises. Personally, I am not so sure whether that small amount of weight difference is worth that amount of compromise. What do you think? Here's a quick 10 seconds of your time. Please, if you're enjoying this video, if you've learned something so far, please think about hitting that subscribe button. It makes the world to us, and it means that suppliers like Fast Forward are much more inclined to send us cool kit for us to review so that you guys can learn more about it. Right, back to the video. Right, last thing I want to do is take a look on the inside. So what we are looking at here, the inside, there we go. We can get a really good shot of that nipple. I have to say, I'd like to see a little bit more penetration that I shouldn't really be able to see all of those threads. And so these lines that you can see, these are little striations that appear when whatever they've used on the inside to make sure you get the compaction has then created these little lines. Now, what we're seeing here is, to be honest, very, very normal. It's probably, I'd say, a medium quality, I'd say. I'll show you something really bad in a second. I'm going to refer back to our video on Princeton wheels because the inside of a Princeton wheel is probably the best quality I've ever seen. There you go, you can see that nipple sat there. We've got a good contact. So what I'm really keen to see here is how well the nipple actually contacts with the bed of the rim, because if you're getting lots of high points, that's a high pressure point. Remember, 140 kilograms of load on there, and you want that area distributed around the entire nipple. So if there's any high points, that will it's normally a bad thing. It looks nice and clean. Can't see any debris from like leftover bits of compaction bags, but it'd be nice if those little lines that you can see were a bit cleaner. So this is the Riot, again, our favorite one. You can see the difference in the nipple there. That is a standard brass Prolock nipple. So you can adjust this either way. So the nipple penetrates quite a long way. So very similar quality to the Raws. A few of those lines, some reinforcement across the top there. You can see the nipple seated quite nicely. What we expect now, just for comparison, this is the Fast Forward Tyro. Now this one has been used a fair bit. So this has probably been used for about a year on and off through a variety of weathers. It's our demo bike, so it's not been ridden as much as like my own personal bike. It's normally kept somewhere pretty dry, but this white stuff that you can see reflecting back on us around that nipple, that's actually the sort of the galvanic corrosion. It all corrodes as like a white powdery stuff. So all that is actually corrosion. You can see where the inside of the rim, there's even more striations, and you can't see the 4K weave across the top where the reinforcements are. It's fairly important because if you can imagine the things that would upset the balance of a wheel, hubs aren't really going to upset them, the spokes are standard length, the nipples are really standard. The things that would upset the balance is deformities and inconsistencies in the rim shape, so that is blobs of resin from the tenting thing. It could be bits where things have been sanded down. It could be how the rim tape is applied. Normally the rim is where you start getting inconsistencies that are going to end up resulting in an unbalanced wheel. Just for comparison's sake, this is a Ven wheel. Some of the best wheels that I've come across in terms of budgets, remember these are under £300 a rim, and this is the sort of quality that you'd expect from something like this. So you can see similar sort of quality to the Tyros there. So there's no reinforcement across the top with that 4K weave. See little evidence of tenting. In fact, there's probably a few little ridges. There we go. You can really see what that looks like now. Okay, general impressions on quality. One, I'd definitely like to see more of the thread penetrate into the nipple or the nut, whatever you like to call it. It's good that all the spoke tension seems to be equal. I think they could be more equal, left and right. And also, I've got no idea whether those spoke tensions are actually in tolerance or not, because I've got no idea what the manufacturer's tolerances are. So who knows? When it comes down to the hub on the outside, all looks very nice. I like the fact that they come with ceramic speed bearings, but it's not really a deal breaker to me. With that said, let's take a look inside. So this is a Fast Forward own hub, but it's a copy of the DT Swiss design. So we have almost exactly the same components, and I'm pretty sure these are cross-compatible. So there is our XDR driver. We have the exact same spacer idea, and we have those ratchets that we're very familiar with seeing as well. That is our non-drive side cap, and behind here there is just one more seal, so we have an additional seal on the non-drive side as well. So these should be ceramic speed bearings, but I mean they spin nicely, but I can't say that they spin any better than say the Karima wheels or an Enduro ceramic bearing. I mean it's nice, you've got to admit, but for ceramic speed and the price that ceramic speed bearings are. I mean, I'd expect like fidget spinner type. Let's get this back together and get a tyre on. All right, before I mount a tyre, I'm gonna have to weigh them. I always forget this bit. So this is the rear wheel, rim tape only, there's and a valve on here. That is 796 grams, light, but there's definitely lighter stuff out there. And the front wheel, let's just pop the valve back in, because this is the one that I was looking into earlier. 680, that's probably 100 grams on the heavy side. It is a 55mm deep to make sure that you're comparing oranges with oranges, but yeah, you'd expect that to be a little bit lighter, I'd say. For comparison, this is a fast forward Riot on the DT Swiss 350 hub. Remember, they do this in 3 hub configurations. They do their own brand hub. They do a 350, which is only really available through independent bike shops, and then they do the DT Swiss 240. So this is the one with the 350 hub on a 44. And that is coming in at 869 grams. So yes, these are arguably on the heavy side, but for me, they are a really solid, robust, reliable, repairable, serviceable wheel. And to me, that is worth 150 grams or so of weight. Let's mount these up. We're going for a 28mm tyre because it's a 21mm internal, 30mm external. So ideally a 28 or a 30mm wheel would be optimal for the aerodynamics and the grip configuration. So, well, that was easy. As if by magic, we have a fully inflated tyre. This is a 28mm, probably the size that I would choose with this. You want this to be a little bit thicker than the wheel itself. This is the rear wheel. You can see this is thicker here, so we are measuring 28.6, and probably the thickest part of the rim 31.8. So in terms of making that nice sort of aerofoil shape, we're doing a pretty good job of that, probably arguably better than the Riot, which is much more of a straight-sided type of shape. Got the 30mm mounted on my 55mm deep Riot. Before I go out and ride these, the verdict is they're okay. I think there are some other things out there that I would still consider over these for the £2,000 price point. One, I think you can probably get something similar but a little bit lighter for the same sort of money, and also I think you can probably get something of a similar weight but more durable. So depending on how they ride, which we're going to go out and do in a second, these are on the maybe pile for now, I think. Whereas the Riots, still definitely highly on the map deck recommended list. I've put about 140 kilometers into these wheels now, and how do they ride? Well, to be honest, as you'd expect, they're nice and stable, nice and light, and nice and stiff. Nothing really to report there. There's nothing particularly special going on with the rim shape or anything else. It's nice that they strip some weight out of it. Do I recommend them? Well, here's the tricky thing, you see. There are still some problems with availability on all of these carbon spokes, as you're probably gathering by this video. The only brand that I think is doing a good job of this at the moment is probably Mavic, and the fact that they now have a standard length spokes for all their carbon spokes, and they have the external nipple which you can adjust from the outside, and those spokes are available from the distributors around the world. What I'm going to say to fast forward is, if these are going to get any sort of recommendations, please, 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 you need to start putting information about these spokes and the availability on your website. I think fast forward, you are ideally placed to have these spokes listed on your website and a page giving wheel builders like us the ability to buy that spoke and have the knowledge to, one, to know how to true it, i.e. make sure you remove the rim tape, go in there with a nut driver, not be tempted to turn this little key here, and also what tension we should be building this up to. I think if we can get those things ticked off, please fast forward, then this can go on the recommended list next to Mavic, and it's a step that so far none of the other Chinese manufacturers have managed to do, and it's the one thing that really should set apart European suppliers over the factory direct ones, is information and availability of spare parts. So this review comes with a plea to get the map deck recommendation. Please make information and spare parts available, and then and only then will it get a big thumbs up from us.